So let's take a look at part 2, how we are going to create the surfaces for this plate. I'm going to first maybe adjust my grid a step further. So the grid is as small. Actually, you notice that this actually means 1/4, so 31 and 31. Actually, this is 62. I make this one 32. Okay. And if I go to right view, you see the grid is only as big as I need. Very convenient. This also actually means maybe those two, just for the sake of being orderly, I am going to move over to here. And I think this one should have moved as well. Right click, grid snap, there. Perfect. Okay, good. So there are actually multiple ways how we can create surfaces, and the art is basically understanding maybe or predicting the steps you will take. And at the beginning as a student, this might be really confusing because you want to do it the right way. And I'm going to tell you straight up, there are complicated ways and there are more efficient ways. There are less necessarily wrong ways. Of course, if you create bad geometry, that's obviously wrong. So for example, one of the wrong ways, which I did in the class demo, was I didn't predict that those lines have to be longer. So I needed to extend the lines. So for this recast, I did that already. But otherwise, I could, for example, create myself an object out of those 4, extrude it, cap the sides, have a solid. Okay. Then, for example, I could select those 2, extrude the surface, and then with the surface trim the cutting part out of this block. And I could select those arcs, extrude them, and then actually cut them out of this part. That all actually, for example, works. It's fine. This way, basically, I have 4 objects. I have my metal sheet object, I have my cutting surface object, and I have my 2 opening surfaces. And then with the trim tool, I can basically say how each one should be interacting with each other. I could also select those edges, but ignore actually this one. Draw myself a new line in between and then extrude everything out. So for example, that means I might have to include another key point curve. So line and then snap and snap. Okay. Snap and snap. And for example, this line here, I'm going to hide for the moment. So there you see that outline more. The main reason is now I could basically select everything at once and drag it out, and then it should all be good. This actually might be the best way. I could also select only all those. Whoops. Extrude them out, and then this opening here, for example, I'm going to use the skin surface to patch the parts in. The end result actually is going to be the same. So there it's really, in this case, left pocket, right pocket. But if I actually extrude everything out this way, I don't have to trim. I have most of the upper parts already defined. But then I can't really select those surfaces and move them left and right and have the trim automatically update. That's a disadvantage. So this was all a lot of theory. So why don't I just actually do it each way? And you see the advantages. So I'm going to save. Now the draft surface, that is the one we're going to use. Other programs simply call this one extrude. But the extrude function in Alias, to be quite honest, is pretty awesome because it also gives you already a draft angle. And it's a really nice tool. So let's select all those curves. And you know what? I'm actually joining them. Join. There. Okay. Then let's double click the draft surface so you see the interface. Now up here, draft normal, for example, you have, for example, a distance. Of course, you need to select an object. So, for example, a length. We know this one should be 1 millimeter. That's as thick as the blade is. We can have both sides, double-sided. Oh yeah, I'm going to show this one as well. And you have a lot of other types as well. Maybe for the moment, let's turn on auto update, and let's turn on diagnostic shading. Maybe make it this way so you can see it, and doesn't really look good because now we're extruding the surface out by 1 millimeter, but we're going straight up the z-axis. So now here you have different vectors. They're predefined. And for example, if you would like this one maybe to be going to the other direction, and you can by hand, for example, rotate them. So this is pretty nice actually. That's the reason why I really like the draft function in Alias. And you simply, to make it precise, you can click on those lines. You see here then this is Y. This is basically negative Y, but then it says manipulator. If we go both sides, see, it actually creates it on both sides. I'm going to do this actually, but I'm reducing the length by 0.5 millimeter, so I only have it actually along each how can I say that, along each side it's just 0.5 millimeter, so the total length is actually 1 millimeter. For example, and I think this all should be, yeah. Then click. Check maybe for a moment for continuity. We don't really see anything, it's not attached. Okay, but yeah, there's something I already don't really like. Yeah, I see those are separate elements. So nope, I want those to be single surfaces and not like individual elements. So let's select those, away with them. Let's go back to here. Select this one. Oh, single surface. I think this might be it. Yeah, there it is. Perfect. See, we extrude this profile to the left and to the right by 0.5 millimeters each direction, and we tell it to make a single surface, what I want. Perfect. Now you might ask yourself, why did I do this? And I'm going to show you that just in a second. So surface, assign, let's hide this one, and actually I'm going to select those two, move, and actually snap it to there. This one I snap to there, and then middle mouse button, move it along the y-axis out. Select those two. Left mouse button, move them along the x-axis a little bit out. Let's go to this view. You see now actually my cutting surface perfectly lines up with my centerline sketch, and now this all perfectly intersects, so it's all centered. I think this is actually easier to read. So maybe let's go to there. There. Great. Okay. And keep this one on the different layer. Good. Let's take a look maybe what the next step would be. So you see this is all open. Let's save. Let's actually, why my key point curves not all on that layer? They should be all on this layer. Assign. Let's go back, and actually I would like to show you something. So we go to the key point curves. You see I have my construction history turned on, and maybe I'm going to click this point. Let's go to this view, and then alt click. You know, we're in perspective mode. I need to snap to something. You see the surface got updated. You notice before I joined them all together, that was the main reason for it, because now I can actually work on my curves. It's kind of like one wire thing, and it always updates then the surface stuff for me. What happens if maybe we select this one and drag it to somewhere else? There. Now, of course, this is going to be tricky to go back. So, because I'm snapping to something unevenly, I don't have the grid line there. So I'm undoing everything. Awesome. Okay. I need more grid snaps. Yeah. So you grid snap to there. Then it's back. Okay. So you see actually I cannot easily move these parts, or maybe I could actually, I think I should be able to. Let's say you and you. No, I only can select one, unfortunately. So maybe this one, select nothing there. Yeah, normally with the midpoint, you can actually rotate it this way, but it's not as easy to move everything at once. So let's leave it at this for the moment. But this was the idea to show you how we can reach or change curves a little bit, and then the surface is updated. If we, like in this case, extrude everything at once. Okay, now I want to check something down here. So this is the positional check, which means it's going to tell me if those edges actually touch each other. And all these edges, for example, give me a P, which means it's positional. And let's delete everything. Good. So step 2, we can actually cap all that stuff. And do we have chain select turned on? So maybe this does not select everything yet. And okay, when this stuff happens, don't click anything, change your view, or go into wireframe mode. Now I don't have an object selected right now, so I could turn maybe shading on off. There, spacebar, and then let's select those. Just trying to click on those clean green lines, spacebar, nothing. And there's, for example, now this block. Great. Let's turn back on our curves, because I need to extrude that cutting surface out. there. And here now, of course, I turn this one off, and now double-sided U and U. So I click them step by step. Oh, nope, 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 nope. So be careful what you click. Don't click by accident any other object. I clicked on this line, and then, for example, I can pull it out. How long you make it doesn't really matter. Just want to make it sufficiently longer so you have a little bit of extra surface to cut. Next. Okay, let's take a look. Yeah, that's fine. Okay, so at this point, I'm going to select all those. I'm going to make myself a new layer, copy and paste, pull it over, because my original design I not necessarily want to work on. I want to keep that one dynamic. And here now I would like to do some trimming stuff. So I'm going to select all these objects and say delete construction history. So I'm going to make unassociated raw surfaces. You see they're all blue now. And then we can maybe take a look actually at the trimming. So here we are, and I'm going to show you how to project the curves and then trim, and actually how to trim a little bit more efficiently. So you see that this surface actually is a little bit above the side of this the sheet blade thing, and we don't really see any lines. So the trim tool doesn't really understand where from what edge to what edge should it cut and then discard the selected surface. So we have to create that surface. So we go to intersect on both sides, go and say, actually I keep this, oops, I keep this one on. So this surface, I would like to intersect with the surface, and there's this green line. That's the one we needed. Because now we can go to trim and say U and U, this one, discard. Nice thing is, if I select this object and actually go to move and move it straight up, you see actually how it retrimmed it. Pretty nice. Okay. Let's maybe do it one more time, but say here, U, spacebar with this surface. Okay, trim, this one, discard. You see there, it's gone. Okay, but we can actually make this a step quicker. Let's go to trim and say 3D trim and intersect, which is pretty much the same. So select surfaces to trim. So we say this one and let's click this one and this one, and you see actually that it created those lines for you. And then I say hue, for example, keep, and then it cut out the lower part. Now let's do it one more time. Hue, click, 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 spacebar. Okay, perfect. Then actually we can go back to the normal trim. Let's turn this one off for a moment and say, for example, U and U. Discard. Oh, it doesn't do that. Interesting. It should actually discard. Yikes. Now we have to figure out what the problem is. So, shaded mode, you don't really see a lot. So let's select those two And then actually, and I already see what the problem is. You see those green lines, those are the cut lines from this surface to there, but there's actually nothing along those lines. So if we select, for example, this one, yeah, okay, good. In this case, how do we fix this? Let's go back, trim, intersect. Let's see if there is. Okay, so maybe actually we have to say you and you and you and you and this one keep. There, see? So the surface with this, and you see those lines coming up and there, they define basically kind of like this area. You click and keep. Could also click on this one, restart there, and say discard, doesn't matter. There it is. Perfect. You saw I made a copy before, and then I removed the construction history. I'm going to ungroup everything here, select this lower base and delete it because we don't need it anymore. Okay, so there's basically our object. I think, we could, for example, select this one and then move it up, and I think it should all snap. This one didn't. Okay, maybe somewhere actually the construction history got lost. So, but at the same time, this doesn't necessarily matter as much. So you see that the trim tool is actually, how could I say, a little bit smart, but you need to select multiple objects. For example, for the side surface that cuts or defines in all those cut surfaces. So you can use this one, or simply go, if you want to, the normal way and intersect all surfaces with each other and then trim selectively. So at the end you might end up more or less with a similar thing, but each one has, how can I say that, maybe their ups and downs. I find actually sometimes they intersect just for my logic, how I think, not bad, and sometimes then I go to the trim tool when I know the steps, or I can predict the steps much quicker. Okay, so that was actually one way. Now let me show you how we can build this one a different way, and then we do a lot more of the trimming, so we have a more dynamic object. So because on this layer I have my surface and it's using this one as a joint part, and I would like to show you this a different approach, I have to for a moment actually break all those elements into smaller units. Those actually I keep. Okay, that's fine. And there is this other line which I'm going to make visible there. And then actually in this case I'm selecting those curves and actually hide them. Okay. So what I'm going to do now is actually go to draft, 0.5, two-sided, single, and then click, 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 and click along the y-axis, for example, doesn't matter, and create myself this block. Okay, now I go to this one, next, and this one, next, and then this one and this one along this direction and pull it out. But now double-sided. Next. Okay, good. So that's what I have. Let's actually for the moment select all these curves, and then I'm going to hide them. And what I have to do now is actually patch the stuff. There. And patch this edge. Okay. So there you see that, for example. Okay. Now I'm going to actually select those, and then I'm hiding it as well. No, wait, let's create a new layer. Will be easier. Assign, be gone, you. There, and this one. Assign. Okay, good. So you see those are individual objects now. You see also where their pivot points are. So let's go to side view. So I see they all snap to the grid to a certain degree. So maybe I can rearrange for way too many snap points. Rearrange the pivot point for those. Okay, great. So what I'm going to do now is actually the following. So I go to, for example, let's do it again with the plane intersect and say this object. So this object, spacebar, intersect with you and you and you. Okay, good. Then the other object, spacebar, with you, you, and this time the other side. Okay. And what is left actually those side surfaces. So this one, spacebar with you and you, and nothing, this one, spacebar, you, and this part. So you see I have cut lines a lot, and now I have to do the same with this one, spacebar. No, actually, never mind, that was silly because these cut lines are represented everywhere already. Great, so then I can go to trim, okay, and say you, keep, spacebar, sorry, click and spacebar. So the upper part, I think, nope, that one I forgot. So we have to do the same on the top. So this surface, spacebar, intersect with you and you, okay, because then I could go and say the surface, you and you. So those two openings, discard. There, see it's open. And then for those blades here, discard, and then those side surfaces, keep, and keep. And silly me, I added this lower surface. Now this is all dynamic. Shouldn't have done that. Well, I might have to remove it at one point, but I'm actually curious. No, there's nothing there. So hold on. Intersect you, spacebar with you, and you. So this is going to be crazy because this is a hairline. In case this blade would penetrate more, we could trim it, but I'm just actually curious what Alias is going to do now if I say you and you discard. Yeah, because there would be no surface properly also left over. So for the moment, that step we just have to ignore. But you see now what we have here. So the nice thing is we could actually show all our key point curves. And for example, maybe select this object. You see now what surface is highlighted. Go to move. Left mouse button is along the x-axis. You see this? So, but it seems not. This, for example, shouldn't really work. Shouldn't happen. So normally Alias should be perfectly able to trim everything. So chances are, why is this happening? Yeah. Oh, yeah. Hold on. No, yeah, this should actually not happen. So this is actually annoying because this is a big surface which is being cut by those openings, and we told him what to keep. So what I could assume is maybe that something with the surfacing is getting confused here right now. So keep that as a warning that you can't necessarily super freely move everything around because objects always need to perfectly intersect. And sometimes the programs can get a little bit confused. But I hope that this way you got partially the idea with the construction history and how we can move parts around and then see, for example, an update of our design. So I'm hoping that maybe I don't have enough undos left. Wah, wah. Okay, but I'm really curious because I want to figure out what the problem there was. So I'm going to delete my construction history, and then I am just selecting this one, undo. Curious if I get this object. Okay, let's move this one up. So let's go to untrim. Yeah, it was one surface. So technically speaking, it really should have worked because by moving those openings, it moved the curves on surface and then retrimmed. So let me try one more thing actually. So let's delete everything. Okay, let's go to curves. I'm going to delete those things as well. No, I just want the surfaces to go and go. So this one I'm going to move back actually to there, so it snaps perfectly. Nothing. And I can actually select this one, and this one, and then right click. You and you. Going to height, invisible. Okay, so let's make a draft surface by 0.5, double-sided. Y next, and then you, and you. Okay. So what we're going to do now, go back to intersect and say this surface intersect with you and you. Okay. And then trim and say, how do you do this best? Okay, you, this part, know on purpose I'm clicking there and keep. So the insides are all gone. Okay, that's good. Then let's select this curve, move. And welcome to Alias. So, let's see there. Ah, there it is. I thought so. Okay. That doesn't necessarily make sense, but it's good to know. And you might ask yourself, no, what I did, and I can show you that. That for me was logically the only explanation for what the alias was going on. So there's my surface. I'm going to trim, and I say the surface, keep, click here, keep, and here I click next to the cut line. So maybe let's go to there, and maybe let's go top view so you see roughly where it is. So let's use this one and line it up. There. And keep. Okay, good. So here I clicked for the cut. Curves. Shoot. There. Okay, now that thing unfortunately is lost, but I hope you saw what I was trying to do. And then middle mouse button. All works. And now I'm getting closer to where I clicked. And if I drag it over to here, it will fail. So wherever you click, you make this mark. You cannot drag a surface over it or it will fail. So I hope basically that this exercise showed you the advantage of the trimming. So we create kind of like this raw body with everything then trimmed out of 3 different parts. Now this process, for example, would work much easier inside a solid modeler because this part would be a solid part and I just move it left and right and it always cuts it out. No brainer. In Alias, no, this is a little bit more tricky. So the way how Alias then rather works is instead of creating those trim surfaces, I think it is much better to create those surfaces individually, because I don't need to trim the stuff, because later when I planar the surface, this opening is being trimmed out anyway automatically, and then I can actually move those points and then by that adjust the opening if desired. So I think in retrospective, the first approach I did was actually the better approach. So yeah, I hope that this was actually quite informative in how, for example, you can try to tackle the surfacing of such a rather simple object and see the up and downs of each tool or process. And again, there's technically speaking no right or wrong. Sometimes, of course, there might be software limitations or some bugs or some things which you need to figure out and then work around. But otherwise, there are more, how can I say that, based on preference or where maybe you get the best result. What is more or most efficient? And in this case, for example, having everything skinned or drafted and then planar, and then this is automatically trimmed by the planar surface was, I think, in Alias better. I can move the points, everything will adjust, instead of having everything to be trimmed. Okay, that was, I think, everything that is there to talk about the blade. now having covered all the stuff, the different directions, I'm going to quickly rebuild this one, actually the most efficient way with the least amount of work. So for example, I know this lower line, which was good for establishing a dimension, I don't need anymore. So I'm going to remove it. I'm going to join, for example, those parts. Perfect. And then I go to my draft surface. This is all set exactly to the same dimension I need. Number one. So you see, this is the surface. Next. Then I click those two along this line, draft it out. No double side needed. Let's overshoot it a little bit. Next. Okay, so this is good. Then actually let's take a look what we have right now. So there's this opening, there's that surface. I can't really planar, how could I say that, fill this area right now, or maybe no, I don't think I can at the moment. So for example, if I select planar here, here, there, and there, 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 oh, there, and there, jeez, rotate the view, spacebar, doesn't work, this lower part is open. So for the moment I simply keep it this way. Let's go to intersect and say this part and this part, spacebar, and those two intersect with this line and this line, spacebar. So you see, this actually worked now. So what I can do now is, for example, go to skin, click this edge, create history is turned on, and go to this edge, spacebar. So now I filled basically this lower edge, because now I can actually create my planar. And there, spacebar. That was the one side. Technically speaking, we could also simply build half a model, to be honest. That could work as well. Spacebar. Okay, let's take a look what we have. Great. And now, for example, we could go to intersect and say this intersect with this one, intersect with this one, and see, then again we unfortunately end up with this part down there, but that's fine. Let's go to trim and discard, keep, there, keep, okay. So that actually went pretty nicely. Also, you see this stuff here, by the way. Tolerance helps. It's just remeshing the stuff. And maybe if you want the tessellation to be accurate, then it's really perfect. Okay, this is good. So for example, now just Let's try a little test. Move this one. Yeah, sure. We can move the surface. That was silly of me, because what I have to move is what creates the surface. Move it up. There, see? And again, watch what you click. So again, I should have selected those surfaces somewhere here. That's the annoying part of Alias, to be honest. But yeah, see, very quickly rebuild that surface. This model, for example, I can keep parametric, so I keep the construction history active. And for something then later I would like to continue working with, I turn all those curves off, making sure I'm only selecting surfaces. This stuff, for example, go to a surface. Let's copy this one for the moment, assign, and then paste. In this part I move to trim layer. For example, there, this part then I delete, because I'm going to delete all the construction history. Select all the stuff, go to delete construction history. Yeah, okay, so now this part is done. This for me is now really my final design I continue working with. And just to make sure that everything is perfect, I'm going to stitch it. So use the stitching tool. Think about like you take two pieces of fabric, needle and thread, and you stitch it together. So you select everything, press spacebar, and then it should create one shell, no boundaries, no manifolds. I don't have any of those, which means this is a watertight object. Then actually I can maybe select shell and hide it, invisible, and then this stuff I delete. I don't need it anymore, because I just wanted to make a copy and be sure that the piece I created was watertight. And yeah, so that's it. This way you create this object and also make sure that, for example, let's say we would 3D print it or so, all edges match up. I could also have with the continuity, check everything. The stitch basically did it mathematically for me. Perfect. So this is really actually everything regarding how to build the blade, all the different tools, the process, and yeah, all the nice stuff about Alias. As a small addition, just so you understand what I meant, or what I mean with surface modeler and solid modeler. And Alias is not really a solid modeler while it has the capability of stitching stuff, which represents a solid. It doesn't really deal it this way. So you see I have actually 3 solid objects. And next to the stitching, of course, it's unstitched, but there's also the ability to perform so-called Boolean operations. So I can select an object and then subtract the volume, the solids of other objects, find the intersection or add union. So for example, in something like Fusion, I could have all these 3 solids, and then actually in Fusion say select this object and subtract those 2 from. Okay, and now if I go to object select and select this shell and move it out, you see it actually created a new object based on the shapes of those 3 solids. Now in Solid Modeler, this would be parametric, which means if I move kind of like one of those inserts, the opening would move with it. Alias doesn't do that. However, something like this, we're actually going to work with inside Fusion 360. I just actually thought, since we covered the stitching, to give you a small understanding of surface modeling and solid modeling. See, this is inside surface, and what that basically means, and also point out that Alias can do some shelling and stitch it, but it's not really like a true solid, so it's not really filled with material. Like you will see that in Fusion. Just this, just as a teaser.